The reading for this week is work by one of the most important post-war writers, Abe Kōbō, called The Red Cocoon, which he published in 1950 as under the title Akai Mayu, translated here as Lane Dunlap. As always, you will have the original Japanese edition as well as the English translation. We will read both in class. And just very briefly, I'm going to introduce Abe Kōbō and then go over the study guide, and then turn the microphone over to my assistant Nicole, who will read the very short work. It's only 3 pages, I think, so the video shouldn't take too long. Abe Kōbō, born 1924 in Tokyo, but he grew up in China, where his father was a doctor at the University of Manchuria Hospital. In 1943, he moved back to Japan and started school at Tokyo University, returning back to Manchuria as World War II approached its end and losing his father to an outbreak of typhoid fever. This first-hand experience of the breakdown of traditional Japanese authority seems to have given rise to a feeling of skepticism, out of which an overriding desire to find the meaning of human existence. Underlying existence, his works are very kind of obsessed with this idea of existence, and there's all kinds of existential elements and so forth that are coming into Japan in the 1950s and 60s, so he's kind of half an existentialist writer and half a communist writer as well. As we will see in this work, he was a committed communist, and this work can be read as a kind of allegory for communism and the idea of the commons and so forth. Abe spent some time with his father's family in Hokkaido before returning to Tokyo, ostensibly to resume his studies, but also working as a peddler and forming friendships with some of the major writers who were associated with the major bunge zashi of the post-war period called Kindai Bungaku. And these writers, Haniya Yutaka, Hanada Kiyoteru, Noma Hiroshi, the great novelist from the war period and post-war period. He published Mume Shishu, nameless anthology, in 1947 at his own expense, while still technically a student, and then at that point gave up medicine altogether in order to become a writer, and associated at first with this group called the Kindai Bungaku, post-war writers who were very kind of leftist-oriented as well. Abe's literary career can be said to have gotten its official start with the publication of Owarishi Michi no Shirubeni, The Marker at the End of the Road, 1948, which relies on surrealistic techniques to explore the reasons for human existence. So underlines surrealism. So there's kind of 3 things going on in most of his works. There's kind of these elements of surrealism and fantasy, and then these existentialist questions that are very informed by existentialist philosophy that's coming into time, as well as communism. So these 3 kind of strands that run throughout his work. As does the story Dendokuro Kakariya, 1949, which is about a man's transformation into a plant. Transformation, metamorphosis, is also a very important theme in his works, as we will see in this story of the Red Cocoon as well. Abe gained critical attention with Akai Mayu, this short story here, another story about human metamorphosis, and then he won the Ashikaga the Ashikaga Prize in 1951 for his work Kabe es Karuma shi no Hanzai, The Wall, Mr. Karma's Crime. Abe went on to achieve a worldwide reputation for such works as Daiyon Kanbyoki, The Inter-Ice Age 4, 1959, Ishinome, Eyes of Stone, 1960. Suna no Onna is his most famous work, The Woman in the Dunes. It's translated as, so it's kind of something of a bestseller. It was made into a film in the 1960s, I think, by I forget the director's name. I'll put a link to the film. It's a masterpiece as a novel and as a film, so I'll put links to both of those in the description. Tani no Kao, The Face of Another, 1964, which is also made into a film by, I think, the same director as the guy who did Suna no Onna. I'll put a link to that in the description as well as Moetsukita Chizu, The Ruined Map, which is also translated into English. The book came out in 1967. Dale Saunders, I think, did that translation. Further, fictional studies of the sources of human anxiety include Hako Otoko, The Box Man, Hakobune Sakura Maru, The Arc Sakura. These are all translated as well. Abe also wrote avant-garde plays such as Tomodachi and Doregari, Slave Hunt, Friends and Slave Hunt, respectively. And he may perhaps be considered Japan's first successful literary modernist, in some ways presaging the contemporary themes and attention-grabbing non-traditional techniques of Murakami Haruki. Okay, this is this introduction I have is taken and kind of loosely adapted from Mark Jewell's a professor at Waseda University, I think, his introduction in one of his encyclopedias, I think. I would take issue with that last statement that he makes there, that Abe Kōbō is the first successful literary modernist, because Abe Kōbō's shisho, or kind of math mentor, was Ishikawa Jun, the great modernist writer that I just finished writing a tome about, who was writing in the 1920s and 30s and 40s in a very modernist vein, and I would argue rather that his mentor, Ishikawa Jun, was probably the first successful literary modernist. But it should be noted that Abe Kōbō is kind of his disciple in many ways, and there are a lot of elements that he takes from Ishikawa's works that we will discuss more in detail in class. All right, just very briefly now, the 12 questions on your study guide. Number 1, describe the narrator. Who is he? What do we know about him? Why does he have no house? Number 2, what does this desire to kill himself come from? Why does he want to commit suicide? What are his motivations? What does he find lacking in his life? That's number 2, the suicide question. Number 3, what is the didactic purpose or message of the story? So again, Abe Kōbō was a committed communist, and his works often have kind of anti-capitalist, anti-authority messages running through them. What is the didactic purpose of this story? Can the story be read as an allegory? And I think it is an allegory. It invites allegorical reading. And as we already know, an allegory is any work in which the major characters and the major events in the story can correspond to something on a non-literal level as well. So the story can be read in 2 levels, the literal level and the allegorical level. So if this is an allegory, which I think it is, what corresponds to what? Explain. Number 4, locate the symbols in the work. There are a lot of symbols that appear: the rope, the house, the cocoon, the park, and so forth. Because it's so short, he has to maximize the effect and the amount of meaning that he infuses into the work, and a writer does so by using symbols and metaphors and so forth. So what do these metaphors that appear in the work signify? Explain. Number 5, why does he think the lady's house is his house? So he stumbles upon this lady's house and he thinks it's his house. Why does he think what is hers is his? Explain. Number 6, what is the work's relation to the idea of communism, or the commons, or koinon, as we say in classical Greek? How is the work different from earlier proletarian works of the 1920s? So you will keep in mind that communist literature, or proletarian literature, did not emerge with Abe Kōbō. It's been around in Japan for a long time, at least since around 1915, 1916 or so. And during the war, of course, it was suppressed, and then after the war, it comes back, but in a very different form than the form it took in the proletarian literature of 1925 to 1938, for example. How is it different from those earlier types of proletarian literature works, literary works? Number 7, describe the lady and her response to him. What does she represent? What class consciousness does she seem to represent? What comment is the author making about her and the type of people she represents? Okay, so there are very few characters in the work. I think just the lady and the first-person narrator. What does this other character represent? Number 8, the cop is another character, so there might be 3 characters in the work. Describe the cop. What does he do? What does he represent? What does he do at the end of the story? What are his motivations? Simple, straightforward question. Number 9, explain this line, which is an important line in the work, where the narrator says, "The wandering Jew, is that who I am?" Number 10, identify the literary techniques used in the story. Metaphor, similes, motifs, interior monologue, etc. The themes, what are the themes? Give examples of these techniques. Theme isn't really a technique, but number 11, describe the narrator's metamorphosis, his henge, or henshin, as we say in Japanese. Henge is the Buddhist way of saying metamorphosis. Are there any Buddhist elements? There might be. We'll consider that too, since we're reading in another class this week, Konjaku Monogatari Shu. So we want to compare some of the metamorphosic, if that's a word, elements in Konjaku Monogatari Shu and other Buddhist setsuwa with the way Abe Kōbō employs this metamorphosis technique. What is happening with these metamorphoses? Why? Discuss the symbolic significance of this transformation, these transformations. And final question, explain the lines, "In the end, I'm gone, and the only trouble is now that I have a house. There's no I. The only trouble now that I have a house is there's no I to return to it." So the I disappears at the end of the story. Why does the I, the first-person narrator, the ego, the I, disappear? What is the meaning of this disappearance? All right, that's all for me from now. Now I'll return the microphone over to Nicole, and she will, as always, mellifluously read the work.
The Red Cocoon, 1950, by Abe Kōbō, translated by Lane Dunlap. The sun is starting to set. It's the time when people hurry home to their roosts, but I don't have a roost to go back to. I go on walking slowly down the narrow cleft between the houses. Although there are so many houses lined up along the streets, why is there not one house which is mine? I think, repeating the same question for the 100th time. When I take a piss against a telephone pole, sometimes there's a scrap of rope hanging down, and I want to hang myself. The rope, looking at my neck out of the corner of its eye, says, "Let's rest, brother." And I want to rest too, but I can't rest. I'm not the rope's brother, and besides, I can't understand why I don't have a house. Every day night comes. When night comes, you have to rest. Houses are to rest in. If that's so, it's not that I don't have a house, is it? Suddenly, I get an idea. Maybe I've been making a serious mistake in my thinking. Maybe it's not that I don't have a house, but that I've forgotten it. That's right, it could be. For example, I stop in front of this house I happen to be passing. Might not this be my house? Of course, compared to other houses, it has no special feature that particularly breeds out the possibility, but one could say the same of any house. That cannot be a proof canceling the fact that this house might be my house. I'm feeling brave. Okay, let's knock on the door. I'm in luck. The smiling face of a woman looks out a half-opened window. She seems kind. The wind of hope blows through the neighborhood of my heart. My heart becomes a flag that spreads out flat and flutters in the wind. I smile too. Like a real gentleman, I say, "Excuse me, but this isn't my house by any chance?" The woman's face abruptly hardens. What? Who are you? About to explain, all of a sudden I can't. I don't know what I should explain. How can I make her understand that it's not a question now of who I am? Getting a little desperate, I say, "Well, if you think this isn't my house, will you please prove it to me?" My God. The woman's face is frightened. That gets me angry. "Well, if you have no proof, it's all right for me to think that it's mine. But this is my house." What does that matter? Just because you say it's yours doesn't mean it's not mine. That's so. Instead of answering, the woman turns her face into a wall and shuts the window. That's the true form of a woman's smiling face. It's always this transformation that gives away the incomprehensible logic by which, because something belongs to someone, it does not belong to me. But why? Why does everything belong to someone else and not to me? Even if it isn't mine, can't there just be one thing that doesn't belong to anyone? Sometimes I have delusions, that the concrete pipes on construction sites or in storage yards are my house. But they're already on the way to belonging to somebody. Because they become someone else's, they disappear without any reference to my wishes or interest in them. They turn into something that is clearly not my house. Why then, how about park benches? They'd be fine, of course. If they were really my house, if only he didn't come and chase me off them with his stick. Certainly they belong to everybody. Not to anybody, but he says, "Hey, you, get up. This bench belongs to everybody. It doesn't belong to anybody. Least of all you. Come on, start moving. If you don't like it, you can spend the night in the basement lockup at the precinct house. If you stop anyplace else, no matter where, you'll be breaking the law." The wandering Jew. Is that who I am? The sun is setting. I keep walking. A house. Houses that don't disappear, turn into something else, that stand on the ground and don't move. Between them, the cleft that keeps changing, that doesn't have any one face that stays the same. The street. On rainy days, it's like a paint-loaded brush. On snowy days, it becomes just with the width of the tire ruts. On windy days, it flows like a conveyor belt. I keep walking. I can't understand why I don't have a house, and so I can't even hang myself. Hey, who's holding me around the ankle? If it's the rope for hanging, don't get so excited, don't be in such a hurry. That's not what it is. It's a sticky silk thread. When I grab it and pull it, the end's in a split between the upper and sole of my shoe. It keeps getting longer and longer, slippery-like. This is weird. My curiosity makes me keep pulling it in. Then something even weirder happens. I'm slowly leaning over. I can't stand up at a right angle to the ground. Has the Earth's axis tilted, or the gravitational force changed direction? A thud. My shoe drops off and hits the ground. I see what's happening. The Earth's axis hasn't tilted. One of my legs has gotten shorter. As I pull at the thread, my leg rapidly gets shorter and shorter. Like the elbow of a frayed jacket unraveling, my leg's unwinding. The thread, like the fiber of a snake gourd, is my disintegrating leg. I can't take one more step. I don't know what to do. I keep on standing. In my hand that doesn't know what to do either, my leg that has turned into a silk thread starts to move by itself. It crawls out smoothly. The tip, without any help from my hand, unwinds itself and like a snake starts wrapping itself around me. When my left leg's all unwound, the thread switches as natural as you please to my right leg. In a little while, the thread has wrapped my whole body in a bag. Even then it doesn't stop, but unwinds me from the hips to the chest, from the chest to the shoulders, and as it unwinds, it straightens the bag from inside. In the end, I'm gone. Afterward, there remained a big, empty cocoon. Now at last I can rest. The evening sun dyes the cocoon red. This, at last, is my house for sure, which nobody can keep me out of. The only trouble is now that I have a house, there's no I to return to it. Inside the cocoon, time stopped. Outside it was dark, but inside the cocoon it was always evening. Illuminated from within, it glowed red with the colors of the sunset. This outstanding peculiarity was bound to catch this sharp policeman's eye. He spotted me, the cocoon, lying between the rails of the crossing. At first he was angry, but soon changing his mind about this unusual find, he put me into his pocket. After tumbling around in there for a while, I was transferred to his son's toy box.
Okay, thank you as always for the lovely mellifluous reading. We will discuss this work in class in great detail and depth. I will see you all then. Goodbye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. It's try time.
Okay, the reading for this week. Again, the picture good. The red cocoon. Here you go.
Alrighty.
Make sure we're still recording. Nice and loud.
Nice and loud. The cocoon.
Nice and loud.
The red cocoon. One more time. This outstanding peculiarity was bound to catch his... What?